The window shattered inward with a sound like a gunshot, and Marcus threw himself against the bedroom door just as the handle began to turn from the outside. His shoulder hit the wood hard enough to send pain radiating down his arm, but the door held, for now. "I know you're in there," the voice came through the door, casual and almost friendly. "Why don't we talk about this?" Marcus's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he looked around his parents' bedroom for anything he could use to barricade the door. The dresser was too heavy to move quickly, the nightstand too light to matter. His phone sat on the kitchen counter downstairs, exactly where he'd left it when he went to answer the door for the pizza delivery guy. Except it hadn't been the pizza delivery guy at all. 20 minutes earlier, Marcus had been scrolling through his phone on the couch, debating whether to watch another episode of the show he'd been binging or finally get some sleep. His parents had left for their holiday trip to Florida 3 days ago, and he'd been enjoying the rare luxury of having the entire house to himself. At 23, he still lived at home while finishing his degree at Cleveland State, and the week alone had felt like a small taste of independence. The knock at the door had been normal enough. He'd ordered a large pepperoni pizza, planning to eat half tonight and save the rest for tomorrow. When he looked through the peephole, he'd seen the delivery guy's red jacket and assumed everything was fine. But when he opened the door, ready to hand over a $20 bill and collect his dinner, he'd noticed something odd. The porch light illuminated a life-sized Santa Claus decoration, standing just to the left of the door. Marcus had paused, pizza money in hand, staring at the jolly figure in the red suit and white beard. His parents hadn't put up any Christmas decorations before they left. His mother had mentioned she'd do it when they got back, wanting to enjoy the Florida sunshine before dealing with the cold and the hassle of untangling lights. "Did you guys bring that?" Marcus had asked the delivery person, pointing at the Santa. The delivery guy, a thin college-age kid with tired eyes, had glanced at the decoration and shrugged. "Wasn't there when I walked up, man. Maybe your neighbors are messing with you." That should have been his first warning. Marcus had taken the pizza, handed over the cash, and watched the delivery guy walk back to his beat-up Honda. Then he'd turned his attention to the Santa Claus figure, stepping closer to examine it. The suit looked expensive, not like the cheap decorations you'd find at a hardware store. The fabric had weight to it, and the beard looked almost real in the dim porch light. He'd reached out to touch it, curious about where it had come from, when the Santa's head had turned toward him. Not the slow, mechanical turn of an animatronic decoration, a fast, deliberate movement, human movement. Marcus had stumbled backward, nearly dropping his pizza as the figure lurched toward him. The beard was real, he realized with horror, because beneath it he could see actual skin, actual eyes, an actual person who had been standing perfectly still on his porch, pretending to be a decoration. The man in the Santa suit had grabbed for him, hands reaching for Marcus's jacket, and pure instinct had kicked in. Marcus had thrown the pizza box at the man's face and bolted back into the house, slamming the door and engaging every lock his parents had installed. 3 deadbolts and a chain. His father had always been paranoid about security. Through the door, he'd heard the man's footsteps, heavy boots clomping across the wooden porch. Then silence. Marcus had pressed his back against the door, breathing hard, trying to decide what to do. Call the police, obviously. but his phone was in the kitchen, and to get there he'd have to move away from the door. That's when he'd heard the crash from the back of the house. The man had gone around to the back door, and Marcus had run upstairs, taking the steps 3 at a time. His parents' bedroom had the sturdiest door and the best lock. It also had a landline, a relic from the 90s that his mother refused to get rid of, just in case. He'd made it inside and locked the door just as he heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, methodical footsteps that seemed to know exactly where he was going. Now, pressed against the door with the handle turning on the other side, Marcus wondered what kind of person did this. Who dressed up as Santa Claus and attacked strangers in their homes? What did this man want? "Please," Marcus called out, hating how his voice shook. "Please just leave. I don't have anything valuable. You can take whatever you want downstairs. Just please go." The handle stopped turning. For a moment there was only silence, and Marcus dared to hope the man was actually considering his offer. Then came the laughter, low and genuinely amused, like Marcus had told a particularly good joke. "I'm not here for your TV, kid." The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. If not robbery, then what? His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. He thought about his neighbors, the Hendersons on the left and the Pratts on the right. The houses were close enough that if he screamed loud enough, surely someone would hear. But it was past 11 on a Wednesday night. People would be asleep. And even if they heard him, would they come help or just call the police? He needed to call the police himself. Marcus released the door and lunged for the nightstand where his mother kept the old cordless phone. His fingers had just closed around it when the first impact hit the door. The man was throwing his weight against it. And the door frame shuddered with each hit. Marcus dialed 911 with shaking fingers, nearly dropping the phone twice before he got it to his ear. 911, what's your emergency? "There's someone in my house," Marcus gasped out, giving his address. "He's trying to break into the bedroom. Please send someone. Please hurry." The operator's voice was calm and professional, asking him questions he barely registered. Was he alone in the house? Yes. Was the intruder armed? He didn't know. Could he get to a safer location? No, he was already trapped. Another impact against the door, harder this time. Marcus heard wood beginning to splinter. "Please tell them to hurry," he begged. "Officers are on their way," the operator assured him. "Stay on the line with me." "Can you describe the intruder?" "He's wearing a Santa Claus suit," Marcus said, aware of how insane it sounded. "Like a full costume with the beard and everything. He was pretending to be a decoration on my porch." There was the briefest pause on the other end of the line. Then, professionally, "Can you estimate his height and build?" "Tall," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the door as it shook with another impact. "Maybe 6 feet. And not fat like Santa. He's strong. The door's about to break." "Stay away from the door," the operator instructed. "Is there a window you can safely exit from?" Marcus looked at the window on the far side of the room. Second floor, and below it was the concrete patio where his father kept the grill. If he jumped, best case scenario, he'd break an ankle. Worst case, he'd break his neck. "I can't," he said. "I'll die if I jump." "Then find something to barricade the door. Furniture. Anything heavy." "The dresser." Marcus dropped the phone on the bed and grabbed the edge of his mother's heavy oak dresser. He pulled with all his strength, managing to move it a few inches before another impact on the door made him freeze. The wood was definitely splitting now. He could see cracks forming around the lock. How long until the police arrived? How long could the door hold? Marcus threw all his weight into moving the dresser, his sneakers slipping on the hardwood floor. The piece of furniture was massive, filled with his mother's clothes, and it barely budged. He adjusted his grip, trying to find better leverage, when he heard the man's voice again. "You're just making this harder on yourself." The next impact wasn't against the door at all. It was against the window Marcus had been considering as an escape route. The man had apparently circled around to the outside, and now he was methodically breaking the glass with something heavy. Each strike sent shards cascading to the bedroom floor. Marcus abandoned the dresser and grabbed the phone again. "He's breaking the window. He's coming through the window." "The officers are almost there," the operator said. "I can hear their sirens. Can you hear them?" Marcus strained to listen past the sound of breaking glass and his own thundering heartbeat. And yes, there it was. The distant wail of police sirens getting closer. The man outside the window must have heard them too, because the breaking stopped. Marcus heard footsteps crunching through the broken glass, then running away from the house. "I think he's leaving," Marcus whispered into the phone. "I think he heard the sirens." "Stay where you are," the operator commanded. "Don't leave the room until the officers confirm it's safe." Marcus sank down against the wall, still clutching the phone, and waited. The sirens grew louder, then stopped. He heard car doors slamming, voices shouting. Someone pounded on the front door, identifying themselves as police. "Stay on the line," the operator told him. "I'll let them know where you are." Minutes later, 2 officers stood in his parents' bedroom, taking in the scene. The splintered door, the broken window, the dresser Marcus had tried and failed to move. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with gray at his temples, put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You did good, kid. You did everything right." Marcus just nodded, not trusting himself to speak without his voice breaking. The younger officer was examining the window. He must have had a crowbar or something similar. "See the marks on the frame?" "Did you catch him?" Marcus asked, finally finding his voice. The gray-haired officer shook his head. "No sign of him. We've got units canvassing the area, but whoever it was is gone. We'll need you to come down to the station and give a full statement." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus learned more than he wanted to know about the man in the Santa suit. The police showed him security footage from a hardware store 3 blocks away. 2 days ago, someone had stolen a Santa costume from their Christmas display. The same costume, they believed, that the intruder had been wearing. "We think he'd been using it to case houses," the gray-haired officer explained. He'd introduced himself as Detective Reeves. "Christmas decorations are everywhere this time of year. Who pays attention to one more Santa on a porch? He can stand there for hours, watching, learning who's home and who's not." "But why target me?" Marcus asked. "My parents' house isn't exactly full of expensive stuff." Detective Reeves exchanged a look with his partner. "We're not sure it was about robbery. The fact that he pursued you so aggressively, that he tried so hard to get to you specifically, that suggests something else." Marcus felt sick. "Like what?" We don't know yet, but we're treating this as attempted assault, possibly worse. You need to take this seriously. They assigned a patrol car to drive past his house every hour for the rest of the night. They took photos of the damage, dusted for fingerprints they said they probably wouldn't find, and strongly suggested Marcus find somewhere else to stay until his parents got back. Marcus called his friend Tyler, who lived in an apartment near campus. "Dude, of course you can crash here," Tyler said immediately. "Pack a bag. I'll come get you." While he waited for Tyler, Marcus sat in his living room, unable to stop replaying the evening. The Santa turning its head. Those first moments of confusion before the terror set in. The sound of the man's footsteps on the stairs, his voice through the door, casual and conversational, like they were old friends. What would have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did? What had the man been planning? Marcus found he didn't want to know the answer. Tyler arrived 20 minutes later, and Marcus threw a duffel bag of clothes and toiletries into the back of his friend's car. As they pulled away from the house, Marcus looked back at the lit windows, the police tape across the front door, and felt a fundamental shift in how he saw the world. Home wasn't safe anymore. Nowhere was safe if someone could just stand on your porch, pretending to be a decoration, waiting for the right moment to strike. "You okay, man?" Tyler asked, glancing over at him. "No," Marcus said honestly. "Not even a little bit." The next morning brought more questions from the police, but no answers. The fingerprints from the door and window frame were smudged and useless. No one in the neighborhood had seen anything suspicious. The Santa suit's tracking led nowhere. It had been purchased with cash from a costume wholesaler who sold thousands of identical suits every year. Detective Reeves called Marcus personally. "I want you to know we're not giving up on this. We've put out alerts to all surrounding counties. If this guy tries anything similar, we'll know about it." "Do you think he will?" Marcus asked. "Try again?" "Honestly, I don't know. Sometimes these guys get spooked and disappear. Sometimes they escalate. Either way, you should stay vigilant." Vigilant. Marcus thought about that word as he went through the motions of the next few days. His parents cut their vacation short and came home, horrified by what had happened. His mother cried when she saw the broken window. His father installed a security system that cost more than their car, complete with cameras covering every angle of the house. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When he walked to his car, he checked the shadows. When he was home alone, every sound made him tense. He started sleeping with a baseball bat next to his bed and kept his phone charged and within reach at all times. Tyler noticed the change. "You're not sleeping," he observed one night when Marcus showed up at his apartment again, unable to stand being alone in his room. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him," Marcus admitted. "That Santa suit, his hands reaching for me, and I keep thinking, what if he comes back? The security system won't matter if I'm not home. What if he follows me somewhere? What if he's watching right now, waiting for another chance?" Tyler didn't have an answer for that, and Marcus didn't expect one. The truth was, the man in the Santa suit had taken something from him that night that the police couldn't recover, and his parents' expensive security system couldn't replace. He'd taken Marcus's sense of safety, his ability to exist in the world without constantly looking over his shoulder. Weeks passed. Christmas came and went. Marcus couldn't bring himself to look at Santa decorations without feeling a spike of anxiety. His parents took down their decorations early, understanding without him having to explain. January arrived with bitter cold and no new information about the intruder. Detective Reeves called less frequently, though he assured Marcus the case was still open. "These things take time," he said. "Sometimes months or even years later, we get a break." But Marcus knew what that meant. They had no leads. The man in the Santa suit had vanished like he'd never existed at all. In February, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't live in his parents' house anymore. Every room carried the memory of that night. The stairs where he'd heard the footsteps, the bedroom where he'd barricaded himself, the porch where it had all started. He found a small apartment near campus, a third-floor unit in a building with good security and lots of neighbors. His parents helped him move, though his mother cried again. "I know you need this," she said, hugging him tight. "I just wish things had been different." "Me too," Marcus said. The new apartment helped, but it didn't fix everything. Marcus still checked his locks multiple times before bed, still kept a weapon within reach, still found himself studying strangers' faces, looking for something familiar in their eyes. The man in the Santa suit was out there somewhere, and until he was caught, Marcus would never really feel safe. But at least now, in this new space with its own locks and its own routines, he could pretend. He could go to class and work his part-time job and hang out with Tyler and act like everything was fine. Most days he could almost believe it. 3 months after the incident, Detective Reeves called with unexpected news. There had been another attempted break-in across town, and the perpetrator had been wearing a Santa suit. "We caught him this time," Reeves said, and Marcus could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He tried the same thing, standing on a porch pretending to be a decoration. But the homeowner had a doorbell camera and called us before opening the door. "Is it him?" Marcus asked, his heart pounding. "The same guy who came after me? We need you to come down to the station for a lineup. Can you do that?" Marcus agreed immediately. An hour later, he stood in a small room, looking through one-way glass at 5 men standing in a line. They were all roughly the same height and build, but Marcus's attention locked onto number 3 immediately. He knew those eyes. Even without the Santa suit even cleaned up and trying to look innocent, Marcus recognized him. "That's him," he said, pointing. "Number 3. That's the man who broke into my house." Detective Reeves nodded. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Positive." The man, it turned out, was named Gerald Patterson, 42 years old with a history of breaking and entering and assault. He'd served time before but had been released on parole 6 months ago. The Santa suit scheme had been his new approach, and it had worked at least 3 times before Marcus's house. The other victims hadn't gotten as clear a look at him. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we prosecute," Reeves said. "With your testimony and the evidence from the other break-ins, he'll be going away for a long time." The trial took months to come together, and Marcus had to relive that night over and over again. In the prosecutor's office, preparing his testimony. In the courtroom itself, with Patterson sitting just feet away, staring at him with those same eyes. In the nightmares that followed each court appearance. But when the guilty verdict came down, Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not healing, exactly. Not yet. But a sense that justice had been served, that the man who had terrorized him couldn't hurt anyone else. "You did good," Detective Reeves told him after the sentencing. "Because of you, we caught him. Because of your testimony, he's off the streets." Marcus nodded, accepting the words, even though they couldn't undo what had happened. Nothing could undo it. But maybe, eventually, he could move forward. That night, in his apartment, Marcus slept without the baseball bat next to his bed for the first time since the incident. He still woke up twice checking the locks, but he went back to sleep. Baby steps. The story could have ended there, with justice served and Marcus beginning to heal. But 5 months after Patterson's sentencing, Detective Reeves called again. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice grave. "Patterson escaped during a prison transfer yesterday." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. What? How? There was an accident on the highway. In the confusion, he managed to slip away. We've got every law enforcement agency in the state looking for him, but I wanted you to know. I wanted you to be careful. Marcus felt the familiar fear rising up, threatening to swallow him whole. "Do you think he'll come after me because I testified?" "I don't know," Reeves admitted. "But I'm not taking chances. I'm putting protection on your apartment, and I think you should consider leaving town for a few days, just until we have him back in custody." But Marcus was tired of running, tired of being afraid. "No," he said, "I'm done letting him control my life. Put the protection on my place if you want, but I'm staying. Marcus, I'm staying." The next week was a special kind of hell. Police parked outside his building 24/7. Marcus couldn't go anywhere without looking over his shoulder, couldn't sleep without imagining Patterson climbing through his window. Every news report about the manhunt sent his anxiety spiking. Tyler tried to convince him to leave. "Dude, pride isn't worth your life. Just go stay with your parents until they catch him." "It's not about pride," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he could explain what it was about. Maybe it was about refusing to be a victim anymore. Maybe it was about reclaiming some sense of control over his own life. Or maybe he was just stubborn and stupid. On the 8th day, Detective Reeves called with news. "We got him. State police found him holed up in a motel outside Cincinnati. He's back in custody, and this time he's going to a maximum security facility. He won't get another chance to escape." Marcus exhaled a breath he felt like he'd been holding for over a week. "Thank God." "How are you holding up?" Reeves asked. "I'm okay," Marcus said, and for the first time in months it felt almost true. "I'm going to be okay." After hanging up, Marcus stood at his apartment window, looking out at the city below. The police car that had been stationed outside pulled away, protection no longer needed. Somewhere out there, Patterson was back behind bars where he belonged. And Marcus was here, alive and safe and free. It would take time to fully process everything that had happened. Therapy helped, and he'd started seeing the counselor who specialized in trauma. Slowly, gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. The constant hypervigilance eased. He could walk down the street without analyzing every person he passed. A year after that Christmas Eve, when a man in a Santa suit had shattered his sense of security, Marcus stood on his apartment balcony, watching the first snow of the season fall. Tyler joined him, handing him a beer. "How you doing, man?" "Really?" Marcus considered the question. He thought about the fear and the anger and the long road to recovery. He thought about the scars that would probably never fully fade. But he also thought about his strength, his resilience, the fact that he'd survived. "I'm getting there," he said. "One day at a time." If you've made it this far into the story, I want to thank you for watching. This is just the first of many terrifying true stories I'll be sharing, and your support means everything. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below telling me what you thought of Marcus's story. Have you ever had a similar experience? How would you have reacted in his situation? I read every comment and I love hearing from you. Now let's move to our next story, because the night is far from over, and the terrors we're about to explore will make the man in the Santa suit seem almost tame by comparison. Sarah Chen's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. In her rearview mirror, the ocean gray Nissan was gaining on her again, and this time she knew with absolute certainty that the driver meant to kill her. This couldn't be happening. It absolutely could not be happening. 2 hours ago, she'd been on her way home from visiting her grandmother in San Luis Obispo, taking the coastal highway because the views were beautiful and she wasn't in any particular hurry. Now she was fleeing for her life on a remote stretch of road with no cell signal and a car that was running on fumes. The Nissan rammed her from behind and Sarah's Honda Civic lurched forward. She screamed, fighting to keep the car on the road as the Nissan pulled back, preparing for another strike. Let me back up. Let me tell you how this nightmare actually started. Because the terrifying thing about what happened to Sarah wasn't just the violence or the chase. It was how ordinary everything had seemed right up until the moment it wasn't. Sarah was 19, a sophomore at UC Berkeley, and she made the drive to visit her grandmother every few weeks. Her grandmother lived in a small house overlooking the ocean, and Sarah loved the visits. They'd bake together, go for walks on the beach, talk about everything and nothing. It was her escape from the stress of college, from the constant pressure of exams and papers, and trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. This particular visit had been no different from any other. She'd arrived Friday evening, spent the weekend helping her grandmother reorganize the garage, and left Sunday afternoon with a trunk full of homemade cookies and a promise to visit again soon. The first hour of the drive was uneventful. Sarah had her music playing, windows down to let in the ocean breeze, mind already turning to the essay she needed to finish for her literature class. She'd been so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice when her car started to sputter. The gas gauge, which had been hovering around a quarter tank when she'd left her grandmother's house, was now firmly in the red. Sarah cursed under her breath. There should have been enough gas to get her to the next town, to the big gas station off the highway where she always stopped. But apparently her gauge had been lying to her. She took the next exit, hoping to find a station. But the ramp led to an empty frontage road with nothing but scrub brush and hills on either side. No buildings, no lights, no signs of civilization at all. Sarah's car coughed twice more, then died completely. She coasted to a stop on the shoulder, the sudden silence after the engine cut out almost deafening. No, 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 she muttered, turning the key. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. Empty. Completely empty. She grabbed her phone, praying for a signal, but the screen showed 0 bars. Of course, this stretch of highway was notorious for dead zones. Sarah sat there for a moment, weighing her options. She could wait and hope someone drove by, though the road seemed pretty deserted. She could walk, but she had no idea how far it was to the nearest town, or she could check her trunk, because she vaguely remembered her father insisting she keep an emergency gas can in the car. Please let it be there, she thought, popping the trunk and getting out of the car. The emergency gas can was indeed there, tucked behind her spare tire. Sarah pulled it out, relieved to feel the weight of liquid inside. Maybe a gallon, enough to get her to an actual gas station. This might not be such a disaster after all. She was pouring the gas into her tank when she heard the car approaching. Sarah looked up to see an ocean-gray Nissan Altima slowing down as it passed her. The driver, a man maybe in his 30s with a baseball cap, pulled low over his eyes, stared at her through his window. Sarah offered a small wave, the universal gesture for, "Thanks for checking, but I'm okay." The man didn't wave back. He just stared. Then, instead of driving on, he pulled over about 50 feet ahead of her car. Sarah's relief at seeing another person curdled into unease. Something about the way the man was sitting in his car, not getting out, not moving, just watching her in his side mirror, made her skin crawl. She finished pouring the gas as quickly as she could, fumbling with the cap on her tank, her eyes never leaving the Nissan. The man still hadn't gotten out of his car. "Get in your car," Sarah told herself. "Lock the doors, start the engine and get out of here." She was reaching for her door handle when the man finally did get out of his car. But instead of walking toward her to offer help or ask if she was okay, he walked in the opposite direction, toward the scrub brush and hills. Within seconds, he disappeared into the landscape. Sarah stood frozen, hand on her door, trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. Why would someone stop like they were going to help, then just walk off into the wilderness? Maybe he needed to pee, she told herself. Maybe he's just a weird guy taking a weird walk. It doesn't mean anything. But her instincts were screaming at her to leave. Now. Sarah got into her car, locked the doors, and turned the key. The engine caught on the first try, and she'd never been so grateful to hear that sound in her life. She pulled back onto the road, accelerating faster than she normally would, putting distance between herself and the mysterious man in the Nissan. In her rearview mirror, she saw him emerge from the brush and walk back to his car. He stood there watching her tail lights disappear, making no move to get back in his vehicle. Weird, Sarah thought. Really weird. But she was away from him now, and that was all that mattered, except it wasn't over, not even close. 10 miles down the road, Sarah saw a gas station and nearly cried with relief. She pulled in, the low fuel warning light glowing accusingly on her dashboard, and filled her tank. While the pump ran, she checked her phone. Still no signal, but that was okay. She'd be back in civilization soon enough. She was replacing the gas cap when she saw it. The ocean-gray Nissan pulling into the gas station. Sarah's heart started to pound. Coincidence, she told herself. Just a coincidence. It's a highway. People need gas. But the man didn't pull up to a pump. He parked in the corner of the lot and sat there, engine running, watching her. That's when Sarah knew with absolute certainty that something was very wrong. She paid for her gas with shaking hands, got back in her car, and pulled onto the highway. This time she watched her mirrors obsessively. The Nissan sat in the parking lot for another 30 seconds, then followed. He was following her. Actually following her. Sarah's mind raced. Should she try to lose him? Should she look for a police station? The problem was she had no idea where the nearest police station was, and the towns along this stretch of highway were small and far between. She accelerated, pushing her Civic to 75, then 80. The Nissan kept pace effortlessly. What did he want? Why was he doing this? Sarah thought about everything she'd heard about situations like this. Don't lead him to your home. Don't stop in an isolated area. Try to get to a public place with lots of people. The next town was Morro Bay, still 20 miles away. Could she make it? Could she keep ahead of him for 20 more miles? She pushed the car to 85. The Nissan accelerated too, closing the distance between them. Sarah's phone rang, startling her so badly she nearly swerved. A signal. She had a signal. She grabbed the phone, expecting to see her grandmother's name or maybe her roommate's. Instead, it was a number she didn't recognize. She answered it anyway, desperate for any kind of connection to another human being. Hello? Heavy breathing on the other end of the line, then a voice, male and rough. You should have stayed broken down. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked in her rearview mirror at the Nissan, at the shape of the man behind the wheel. He was holding a phone to his ear. Who are you? She demanded, trying to keep the terror out of her voice. What do you want? He laughed, a sound that made her stomach turn. I want you to pull over, nice and easy. No more running. Go to hell, Sarah said and hung up. Immediately she dialed 911. The call connected and Sarah nearly sobbed with relief. 911, what's your emergency? I'm being followed, Sarah gasped out. On Highway 1, heading toward Morro Bay. There's a man in a gray Nissan and he's been following me for miles and he just called me and threatened me and I don't know what to do. Okay, stay calm, the operator said. What's your exact location? Sarah looked around frantically for a mile marker or landmark. I don't know exactly. I'm maybe 15 miles south of Morro Bay, on Highway 1. Okay, I'm dispatching officers now. Do not stop your vehicle. Keep driving toward Morro Bay. How close is the other car? Sarah checked her mirror. Maybe 2 car lengths behind me. He's right on top of me. Can you accelerate safely? I'm already going 90. The Nissan surged forward and tapped her rear bumper. Just a gentle tap, but enough to make the Civic wobble. He just hit me, Sarah screamed. He just hit my car. Officers are on their way. Keep the car on the road. Do not stop. Can you describe the vehicle following you? Ocean gray Nissan Altima. I don't know the year. There's a crack in the windshield on the passenger side. The driver is a white male, maybe 30s, wearing a baseball cap. The Nissan hit her again, harder this time. Sarah's phone flew out of her hand and landed somewhere in the passenger footwell. Hello? She heard the operator's tiny voice calling. Hello? Are you still there? But Sarah couldn't reach the phone. Both hands were locked on the steering wheel as the Nissan rammed her a third time. He was trying to force her off the road. The The highway here ran along the cliffs, with the ocean far below on one side and rocky hills on the other. If Sarah lost control, if she went over the edge, she would die. It was that simple. She fought to keep the car straight as the Nissan hit her again and again. The man wasn't trying to pass her or force her to stop anymore. He was trying to kill her. Why? Why? The question screamed through Sarah's mind as she wrestled with the steering wheel. She didn't know this man. She'd never seen him before today. What could she possibly have done to make him want to murder her? Or maybe she hadn't done anything. Maybe she'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A random target for a predator who trolled the highways looking for vulnerable young women alone in their cars. The thought made her furious. She was not going to die because some psychopath decided to hunt her for sport. Sarah saw a turnoff ahead, a small access road that curved back toward the hills. She had an idea, a terrible idea, but it was better than nothing. At the last possible second, she yanked the wheel hard to the right and took the turnoff at 60 miles per hour. The Civic's tires screamed in protest, and for a horrible moment Sarah thought she was going to flip. But the car held and she roared up the access road. The Nissan tried to follow, but the driver wasn't expecting the sudden turn. He overcompensated, and Sarah watched in her mirror as the Nissan spun out. For a brief, glorious moment, she thought she'd lost him. The Nissan had rotated a full 180 and now faced the wrong direction on the access road. Sarah gunned the engine, putting as much distance as she could between herself and her pursuer. But the access road was narrow and winding, carved into the hillside with barely enough room for one car. Where was it leading? Sarah had no idea. She just knew she had to keep moving, had to find help before the man in the Nissan recovered and came after her again. The road climbed higher into the hills, away from the highway and the ocean, away from help. Sarah realized with growing dread that she'd made a mistake. This wasn't a road that led to a town or a house or anywhere she could find people. This was probably just a maintenance road for the power lines she could now see running parallel to her path. Dead end. This was going to be a dead end, and then she'd be trapped. Sarah frantically looked for a place to turn around, but the road was too narrow. Vegetation pressed in on both sides, scraping against her car's paint. She'd committed to this path, and now she had to see it through. Behind her, in the distance, she heard an engine roaring to life. The Nissan. He was coming. The access road crested a hill, and Sarah saw what she'd been dreading. The pavement ended in a small clearing with a utility shed and nothing else. No other roads, no escape routes, just empty hillside and the way she'd come. She slammed on the brakes, her mind spinning through options. She could try to ram past him when he came up the road. She could get out and run into the hills on foot. She could hide in the utility shed and pray he didn't find her. All terrible options, all likely to end with her dead. Sarah grabbed her phone from the footwell. The call to 911 had disconnected, and now she had no signal again. Of course, the hills were blocking it. The sound of the Nissan's engine grew louder. He was close now, maybe 30 seconds away from cresting the hill and seeing her trapped in this clearing. Sarah made a decision. She couldn't outrun him in the car, and she couldn't hide, but maybe she could fight. She popped the trunk and jumped out of the car, running to the back. Her father had insisted she keep an emergency kit in the trunk, along with the gas can. Flares, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and yes, a tire iron. Sarah grabbed the tire iron, the metal cold and heavy in her hands. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The Nissan appeared at the top of the hill, and Sarah's courage nearly failed her. The car looked huge and menacing, and she was just a 19-year-old girl with a tire iron. What was she thinking? But then she remembered the man's voice on the phone. "You should have stayed broken down." He'd been planning this from the moment he saw her stranded on the highway. He'd walked into the hills to what? Hide his license plate, prepare his weapons. And when she'd escaped, when she'd gotten her car running and fled, he'd pursued her with the single-minded determination of a predator who'd been denied his prey. Sarah was not going to be his prey. The Nissan stopped about 20 feet from her Civic, the engine idling. Through the windshield, Sarah could see the man more clearly now. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe late 20s. His face was gaunt, with deep-set eyes that were bloodshot and wrong. Whatever was going on behind those eyes, it wasn't anything sane. He opened his door and stepped out, and Sarah's grip tightened on the tire iron. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, and thin in a way that suggested wiry strength. He wore jeans and a faded Metallica t-shirt and held something in his right hand. A knife. Of course he had a knife. "You led me on quite a chase," the man said, his voice conversational, like they were acquaintances meeting for coffee, not a predator and his intended victim facing off in a remote clearing. "Stay back," Sarah warned, raising the tire iron. "The police are coming. They know exactly where I am." The man smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Sarah had ever seen. "No, they don't. No signal out here. Nobody knows where you are except me." He started walking toward her, knife held casually at his side. Sarah backed up until she hit her own car. "Why are you doing this? I don't even know you." "Does it matter?" the man asked, still advancing. "You were there. You were alone. You were perfect." Perfect for what? Sarah didn't want to know, didn't want to think about what this man had been planning when he'd stopped on the highway and walked into the hills. "I will fight you," Sarah said, her voice shaking but determined. "I will fight you with everything I have." "I know," the man said, and he sounded almost pleased. "That's the fun part." He lunged. Sarah swung the tire iron with all her strength, aiming for his head. The man ducked under the swing and grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. Sarah screamed and drove her knee up into his groin as hard as she could. The man grunted and his grip loosened just enough for Sarah to wrench free. She swung the tire iron again, and this time it connected with his shoulder. The impact jarred her arms, but the man barely flinched. He slashed with the knife, and Sarah felt a line of fire across her forearm as the blade opened her skin. Blood welled up instantly, staining her sleeve red. The sight of her own blood triggered something primal in Sarah. Pure survival instinct kicked in, drowning out the fear. She dropped low and swung the tire iron at the man's knees. Metal connected with bone with a sickening crack, and the man howled. He stumbled, and Sarah didn't wait to see if he'd fall. She ran. Not to her car, which would take precious seconds to start. Not into the hills, where he could track her down. She ran toward the Nissan, which still sat with its engine running. The man realized what she was doing and tried to intercept her, but his injured knee slowed him down. Sarah reached the Nissan 2 seconds before he did and threw herself into the driver's seat. She slammed the door and hit the lock button just as the man crashed into the side of the car. He pounded on the window with the knife, the blade leaving scratches on the glass but not breaking through. Sarah jammed the car into reverse and floored it. The Nissan shot backward and the man had to jump aside or be run over. Sarah spun the wheel, executing a clumsy 3-point turn in the small clearing, then pointed the car back down the access road. In the rearview mirror, she saw the man limping toward her Civic, probably planning to use it to chase her. But Sarah had the keys to the Civic in her pocket, and by the time he figured out how to hotwire it or gave up and started walking, she'd be long gone. The Nissan handled differently than her Civic, more powerful but also more unwieldy. Sarah didn't care. She drove like her life depended on it, because it absolutely did, careening down the narrow access road at speeds that would have terrified her an hour ago. When she finally reached the highway again, she turned toward Morro Bay and didn't slow down until she saw the flashing lights of police cars in the distance. 3 patrol cars were parked on the shoulder, officers standing outside looking at their phones and radios, clearly trying to coordinate a search. Sarah pulled over in front of them, nearly sideswiping the first car in her haste. She stumbled out of the Nissan, and the officers immediately drew their weapons, shouting at her to put her hands up. "I'm Sarah Chen," she screamed. "I called 911. That man tried to kill me and I had to steal his car, and he's still up there, and please, please, you have to believe me." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush, and Sarah barely made sense. But one of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, holstered her weapon and approached slowly. "You're Sarah? The girl who called about being followed?" "Yes," Sarah sobbed, and suddenly she was crying, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking and weak. "He's up that access road. He tried to run me off the highway and I turned onto this access road, and he cornered me and I hit him with the tire iron and stole his car, and my car is still up there and—" Okay, the officer said gently, putting a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're safe now. Let's get you checked out by the paramedics, and you can tell us everything." The next few hours were a blur. Paramedics treated the knife wound on Sarah's arm, which turned out to be shallower than it looked, requiring only butterfly bandages. Police officers took her statement, asking her to repeat the story multiple times, getting every detail. More officers headed up the access road to find the man and Sarah's car. They found the Civic, but the man was gone. He'd apparently fled into the hills on foot, despite his injured knee. "We'll find him," one of the officers assured Sarah. "We've got his car, his plates, probably his DNA all over that knife. He's not getting away.